I swear to you guys, I'm gonna get back to the reading order stuff pretty soon. You know, that's clearly all that my viewers want to see, but in the meantime, I gotta talk about some stuff that's a little bit more fun for me. I've talked a lot on this channel about how I've slowed down my buying habits and how I really only buy like omnibus editions, collected edition stuff, or like big ticket books, the stuff that's like big holes, big wish list items in my collection. And my trip this year to Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle, Washington was no exception. I spent 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, at Emerald City Comic Con. It was really exciting. It was a really great time. I'm so glad that I went. And I want to talk first about the con and then about what I picked up because I got some stuff that is really exciting. First of all, let's talk like con experiences because for me, there's a super wide range. I've been to a ton of different cons all over the country. In 2023, I even went to New York City Comic Con, New York Comic Con, which is like huge. I mean, that was one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. I went to Fan Expo Chicago that year, which is where I got my Secret Wars 8. I went to Great Lakes Comic Con in early 2024, which is where I got my ASM 300. I've been to WonderCon in LA and Comic Con Revolution, which is around the same area of SoCal. Actually, between the two, I preferred Comic Con Revolution. It just feels so much more comic focused than WonderCon, which is kind of to be expected. But it's also a little bit smaller, so it's like easier to see everything and really soak it in. It feels like the only big one I've ever been to is San Diego Comic Con, and truthfully, I don't have a ton of desire to go to that. It just feels like suffocatingly big. And because I'm not there for like movie news or anything that's in the broader entertainment sphere, I'm generally just there for comic books. It makes a lot more sense for me to only go to the ones that are more focused on comic creators. That's why New York Comic Con was so crazy to me because I was able to knock a ton of people off my like dream wish list of comic creators to meet. I met Jim Lee there. I met Kevin Eastman there. I had already met Frank Miller at that point at Fan Expo Chicago, so I got him to sign my copy of All-Star Batman and Robin issue 1, and then Jim Lee to sign it as well. And then Alex Sinclair was also at New York Comic Con, and Scott Williams, so that makes my first quadruple signature book. So I am generally looking for comic creators to meet. That's kind of my goal when I go to a con, is I'll go through my collection with CLZ and I'll sort of cross-reference it with all the comic guests that are going to be in attendance, and then I'll pull out books that I think have a cool cover or maybe have been signed by somebody else already, and I'll just decide what I want to take and get signed. And so I'll spend usually the first day of any convention just going around to booths and getting signatures on stuff. For me, the signature process is mostly just like to get an experience meeting that artist or writer. I don't care about the value. I'm not really hanging stuff up necessarily like graded. I'm not sending it to get graded. So they're display pieces, yeah, but they're also just like a way for me to remember that I met that creator, which is really cool because I have a ton of these fun stories about times that I've met people that are big in comics to me and are very impactful to me. One story I'm going to tell really quick just because it's probably the biggest flex that I have. You know, the running joke when you meet Frank Miller is that he's kind of a grouchy old man, and people will say, you know, oh, it's just don't hassle him, don't say too much to him, just get the signature, you know, and then move along in the line. He's probably going to be sort of old and grumpy and whatever. And I didn't know what to expect because I'd never met him before, but that's what the people around me in line were saying when I was in line at Fan Expo Chicago a couple years ago. And sure enough, it did seem like the vibe in line was that he was not really spending a lot of time talking to everybody, which is fine. It's not, you know, his job to do that. People are there to purchase something from him. So he's selling his signature, and that's what they're getting. But I was wearing my Mobius and Stan Lee Silver Surfer miniseries shirt. But right as I got to the front of the line, and I'm standing in front of Frank, I'm the next person, and I've got my books in hand. They're out, they're ready. Somebody from the convention who's working in the convention came up to talk to him and his team, and I don't know about what. I'm sure it was about a signing or a panel or something he had to get to. And so they're chatting, and they're catching up, and they're talking for like a good probably 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm standing there with my books out, just kind of embarrassed, and I'm thinking, this is going to make this really awkward because then he's just going to turn to me, kind of sign the books, and get back to this conversation. But I just waited and saw when they were done with their conversation, and then I stepped forward, and Frank went to sign the books, and then he looked up at me, and he saw my shirt, and he said, "Hey, that's a really cool shirt. That's really great. Mobius, talk about a great artist." And I said, "Yeah, you know, I love this series, this miniseries. I thought it's really great. Silver Surfer, one of my favorite characters." And he said, "Yeah, you know, I really loved his interpretation of the Surfer and Galactus." And we start talking, and the conversation only lasts like 2 minutes, but he clearly was like very interested in that miniseries and the book that I was representing and wearing in my shirt, which I just thought was really, really cool. And so then at the end of the conversation, I just said, "Hey, you know, thank you so much for the work that you've done with comic books and for the stories you've written. It means so much to so many of us, and to myself, not the least. You know, it's very important to me in my life." And he said, "Thank you, you know, have a great con." And I walked away, and I thought that like maybe what had happened, and I could be wrong about this, but I felt like in general, people have this idea in their head of how a creator is going to be based on some reputation they've heard, and they go into that sort of conversation anticipating that, so they are sort of already feeding the idea that like Frank Miller's gonna be kind of mean and grouchy, so then anything he says they're interpreting in that way. And I didn't know that. I didn't assume that. I went in just thinking that like this is just gonna be a guy who, in my mind, it doesn't really matter how he talks to me. I don't really care. He's a legend in what he does. You know, he's done some really groundbreaking, important work that I love and that has meant a lot to me over the course of my life. So I'm just gonna go in and sort of of not expect anything and just get whatever I get. And sure enough, I think that resulted in a better fan interaction than maybe other people have had. And I don't necessarily credit that to myself. It's just like, I think we all can probably do better about that. You know, go into conversations with someone you're paying to write their name on a piece of paper and just view them as a person and just hope that you're going to have a good time talking to them just like you would anybody. This also means for me that anytime I've met somebody at a con and it's been like an awkward or stiff interaction, I don't take that as sort of any sort of pronouncement of their character. I assume that like maybe they're just having an off day or an off hour or an off 10 minutes. You know, somebody may have just ripped them off and sold them something or bought something from them and not given them the cash, or, you know, something could have happened that made their con experience bad. And then I'm the next person that walks up. And so I get kind of brushed off, and that's okay. That's understandable. The volume of people that these people are talking to, it's amazing. It's incredible sometimes. So I don't really fault them if I have sort of an odd interaction. Sure. I mean, I guess if someone was ever overtly mean, whatever, who cares? I'm going to move on anyway, but like, I would understand that I maybe don't want to talk to that person anymore, but that's never happened to me. The people who are like overtly mean, who don't want to talk to anybody, they're not at these cons. It's warmer in my apartment than I thought it was when I started shooting this video, so. Oh, one other thing about Frank Miller. When I went across the con at Fan Expo to get the book signed by Claus Janson, who has inked a lot of Frank's work, Claus took the book and said, "Oh, you already had Frank sign this?" I said, "Yeah, I just came from his booth." And he looked at me and he said, "Wow, you look a lot like a young Frank Miller." And I said, "Are you serious? I don't think so at all." And he said, "Oh, no, you're not knowing what I know. I've worked with Frank for a long time. Go home and look up young Frank Miller." And this is the picture that I found online when I did, which I'm not going to say he was wrong, because that's a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. So when it comes to Emerald City Comic Con this year, there were a few factors that really motivated me to want to go. One, I haven't been to a Comic Con in over a year at this point. The last one I went to was Great Lakes Con in Michigan in February of 2024. So it's been a long time since I was at a Comic Con. For me, that's a very long time, because I went to a lot back to back in 2022 and 2023. Next was the guest. My big ticket comic guest was James Tynion. I did not get a chance to meet him. He only had like 2 signings, and I just couldn't make it during either of those times that day. And also, like, I only had one book for him to sign. It was a Batman book that he had worked on, which was cool, but his name wasn't on the cover, and it's a book that I already have signed by Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, so it's not like I was missing out on anything crazy. I guess I could have had him sign a copy of my World Tree trade paperback, but like, that's pretty much it. I have a heavily water damaged copy of Something Is Killing the Children Volume 1. It's water damaged because I had it in a bag one time and I got caught in a rainstorm, so I just didn't feel like it was worth it to have him sign that. I only ended up with 3 signatures on books that I owned that I wanted to get signed at the con. So the first one is Kyle Higgins on a copy of Darkhawk 1 from, I think this is the 2021 series. It's the mini series that he did. Kyle was a super cool guy. I was really excited when I got up to his booth because by pure chance, I walk up and I say, "Hey, you know, I'm a big fan. I would love to get your signature on this book." I turn to my left because I hear a voice I recognize, and Chris, who runs Comic Tropes here on YouTube, is standing right there. And I said, "Oh my God, I watch your YouTube channel." And he said, "Oh, really?" And we started talking, and he knows Kyle. And so Kyle and I and him all started talking. And that was a crazy moment because I didn't know that a lot of like comic YouTubers are in the Pacific Northwest where I am. I started seeing people on TikTok that I follow, like Sir Superhero and a bunch of other comic creators, were all at Emerald City Comic Con. I had no idea. I didn't know. I'm here, but I'm like not in the community yet the way that a lot of these other people are. So it was really crazy to find out that these people are very local. Some of them could be my neighbors. They're at the same con that I'm at, which I thought was really neat. Also, Aaron Cooter signed this copy of Fantastic Four. I think it's number 7. Very cool. It's an Ribic Galactus cover, which I thought was really beautiful. We talked about the cover a little bit, talked about the interior art. He had some amazing original art pieces and interior pages from Daredevil and some other books at his booth. Seemed like a super cool guy. I was really excited to get the chance to talk with him and to get that signature on the book. Now, my dream would have been to get him to sign the copy of Avengers Assemble Omega number 1, which I have the Alex Ross Timeless Galactus variant, but that variant is a 9.8, and I'm not cracking that open to get the interior artist to sign it, even though a double signature book would be amazing for something like that. That Alex Ross 9.8 is just, it's too precious to me. Getting into the con, one of the features that I thought was really neat is that it takes place across like a couple blocks of the city, which Seattle is a pretty walkable place when you get to the parts of downtown that are walkable. I know that's a little bit redundant to say it's walkable where it's walkable, but I think if you've been to Seattle, you kind of understand what I mean. There are parts that are not walkable at all, but then when you get to a neighborhood that's very accessible and easy to get around, it is very walkable. One of the advantages of this show is that my girlfriend's place is very, very close in Cap Hill, so it was super easy to like walk back to her apartment and have lunch and take a break from walking around, and then we could go back to the con. Will call for tickets was in the Arch building, which is really beautiful, but really didn't have anything con-wise going on other than if you were there for celebrity autographs, which I wasn't. But it was still cool to get a chance to see what a lot of people are there for, to see this other side of Comic-Con that I don't really engage with. I do like when cons kind of merge those things into one room and one building. The only downside is that when it's in a space that's not big enough, you really end up running into people. You really end up bumping into people. At Fan Expo Chicago in 2023 was the perfect example of this, where like, I think Matthew Broderick was there or some other like 80s movie star, and the line to meet him was running into the line for Frank Miller. So it was like you kind of had this blurry thing, and they had pretty good crowd control and pretty good line management. But I just felt like, okay, if this was like a little bit farther away, or if we just had dedicated more space to that, those people could be over there and we wouldn't sort of be running into them and having logistical problems. So it's cool that Seattle is able to separate the two venues and allow space for both things to happen. And they're like a block away from each other. The main con was in the Summit building, which is on Pine, and it was a beautiful entrance and just like way to get into the con. It's a beautiful building. It feels so new. It feels so bright, so vibrant, and the views were amazing from like way up high on the 5th and 6th floors. The first day that I went, I got all the signatures that I wanted. So I got those out of the way, and I did some of my shopping. So the first books that I got at Emerald City Comic-Con were The Amazing Spider-Man 301. This completes the duology, the duo of ASM 300 and 301, two of Todd McFarlane's most iconic covers. I got this for what I checked and double checked was well below market value. To me, condition doesn't really matter, but it is in really great shape, which is very cool. My ASM 300 is in bad shape. It has bad spine curl, very tattered corners and edges. I love it for that. I think it presents really well. It's really beautiful. But it is cool to have an ASM 301 that is in really nice shape, and just to have these on display next to each other. It's cool. It feels like I kind of finished the Todd McFarlane set that I've always wanted. There's a few more random Amazing Spider-Man covers that I would love to pick up at some point, but generally these are the two big ones for me. I'd like to do a video on this at some point, but I am a Venom hater through and through. Like, I don't like Venom. I don't collect anything with Venom on it. And so it's cool that these are like the books that introduced Venom, but he's not on the cover, because a lot of people, when you talk about Todd Venom work, they're talking about that iconic cover of him like on top of Spider-Man attack him. I don't want that one, so I'm saving money by just not caring about that cover because I don't think it's cool. Getting an ASM 301 is something I've been looking at for a very long time. To me, it was like there are 4 big Spider-Man books that I think I knew were achievable for me and that I knew I would eventually get. Just took some time, and this is the 4th one. This is the final one. A couple years ago, I picked up a vintage button, a pin that's the cover of ASM 301, and for a while I thought that was just kind of a funny way to symbolize the last book in that set of 4. But now I have it. I have all 4 on my wall. Big moment for me. Very cool to sort of close that chapter on Spider-Man collecting. There are so few books in the ASM run now that I'm interested in getting. After picking up the ASM 301, I figured I had space in my budget and in my bag for one more big ticket book. If I could find something at the right price point, if I could find something that was such a holy grail level that it met or exceeded that 301, then maybe I would pick it up. Believe it or not, at the same booth where I picked up ASM 301, unfortunately, I did not write down the name of the booth. I wish I could shout them out. It was just one of many comic booths I had been at that day. But in the same booth, in a separate bin, I found a copy of Marvel Spotlight number 28, Marvel Spotlight on Moon Knight. This is the second appearance of the Moon Knight character. This is one of his most iconic early appearance covers. I have had a Moon Knight issue 1 since I was like 11 years old. I love that comic. I've been talking about it on YouTube forever, even though those videos are long private. But this, to me, is like one of the big 3 when it comes to Moon Knight. Ever since Moon Knight has become like more popular in the mainstream, it is getting harder and harder to find these books because people are catching on. And when a character like this gets popular, you know, obviously the books get more expensive. And so a first appearance of Moon Knight, that Werewolf by Night cover, I just think it's not really in the cards for me right now. But this Marvel Spotlight 28 is a big one for me. This is huge. It's a big part of the display that I want to eventually have for Moon Knight now that I've got a bunch of the action figures and the Khonshu figure and some other things. And even though I think that this cover is like somewhat ugly, it is iconic. There's a lot of covers like that for me where I feel like the iconicness of it, the fact that it's popular, the fact that it really relates to the character, that's what sells it for me, even if I think that the graphic design of it is fundamentally like not that interesting or not that crazy. I like this because it's a really interesting, cool shot of his pose. It's a nice costume that we don't really see a lot of anymore. It's a design that has changed a lot over the years. And honestly, I'm surprised we don't see more homage covers of this one because it's bold. Even if the yellow is like ugly and doesn't really work with Moon Knight as a character, it is a bold thing, and I'm surprised we haven't seen a lot of takeoffs on this cover with newer characters as Moon Knight has been getting more popular. I actually just Googled it, and I can't find a single copy of any comic that has done an homage cover to this cover. I guess there's been like a few painted new versions of that Werewolf by Night cover with his first appearance, but no one's doing this, which I just feel like it's a lost potential. So there I was, with two of my biggest Holy Grail books in my hands, and I thought, all right, well, if there's anything else I buy at this con, it needs to be pretty small, because these were my big purchases, and I'm not really interested in hauling a bunch of stuff. Even though I'm within walking distance of home, I thought it's not really worth it to have a big heavy bag of stuff I have to cart around. Here's where we get to one of my gripes, one of my complaints about Emerald City Comic Con. And this is just something that I think generally applies to Comic Cons right now, weirdly, because of the moment we're having in the world. At least this seemed to apply in 2023. I didn't really go to any cons in 2024, so I don't really know if this has been the case, but 2023 did seem to be this, and it seemed a lot worse at this con, so I'd be curious to hear anyone else's experience. My question is, where are the action figures? I swear to you, I went up and down Emerald City Comic Con, the entire show floor and all of Artist Alley like 4 times. There were like no booths with like old Ninja Turtles or like old He-Man action figures. There were a few here and there, but it was like really stark. Mostly, you could not find Marvel Legends in this building. This was the most shocking thing to me. I was seeing like peg warmer, like Eternals figures that you would find at Ollie's or Ross, instead of what I'm used to at a con, which is like a big couple bins of loose figures in plastic bags for like 15 bucks. It's a great way to build Marvel Legends for a guy like me who just puts them up on a shelf, you know, not in the box, but just like older used figures. I didn't see any of that. I think there was one booth where I saw characters in bags like that. And then I was seeing like some new Marvel Legends, a handful of Marvel Legends. Many of them opened Marvel Legends with the Build-A-Figure taken out. And that's fine. I think that's good for some collectors. And like for me, especially, something like that is great. But I'm really shocked that there wasn't booths and places for you to get action figures at this con, because maybe I'm a little bit too chronically online. Maybe I'm in the right spaces of the internet that make me think that everyone is about this. But like Marvel Legends are having a big moment right now. I feel like they're having this thing where like the license for DC is wavering and McFarlane's standing with the community is like always somewhat teetering on the brink of disaster. So the fact that Marvel Legends are readily available generally, they have a ton of obscure characters, they're all over the place, they're just good enough with articulation that collectors like them and are buying them. It was just really surprising to me that we did not have basically any action figure booths or people selling action figures at this con. That said, I did find one. There was one booth, Top Shelf Toys, give them a little shout out there, that had a handful of action figures. I was bummed because there was a couple figures I saw and I thought, you know, I might come back for these. They're very cheap. And then I did a couple laps around the con and I came back to buy them because I decided I wanted them and they were all gone. But the only one that was left was one that I picked up that I am very excited about. This is the McFarlane Spawn Redeemer figure. I think this is a great figure. It's very cool. It's going to go really nicely with my Spawn display. It's got good articulation, although some of the joints feel like they're 3D printed. Like they feel like they're going to snap. Other ones feel really solid, but I don't know. It's just kind of an odd figure to pose. Generally, McFarlane figures, I always have trouble making them stand up, which is why I am thankful they come with the little circular base plate, but it just feels like something that shouldn't be necessary when like almost all Marvel Legends stand up on their own. This was kind of funny to me too, because when I first picked up the figure, I saw the $10 price tag and I thought, wow, 10 bucks, that's great. I've seen this at like Walmart or Target or whatever for like 25 or 30 bucks. And then I turned it around and I saw the price tag on the back that showed they had bought it from Ross for $5. So we kind of both won here, even though the lesson I did take away is that I should be going to Ross to see what action figures they have. I felt like we both kind of win there. They buy it for $5, they make a $5 profit. I'm not buying it for original retail price. I did almost buy a Marvel Legends long shot figure, like the Retro Card X-Men series, but it was another 10 bucks and I just felt like at the end of the con it was not going to be worth it. I don't buy X-Men figures kind of on principle. Like I have a Colossus and Cyclops from Marvel Selects, but I just didn't feel like I had a place anywhere in my display for long shot. I don't have any comics with him on the cover, so I couldn't even do sort of my dream setup where I have a comic and an action figure in front of it. But I do feel like this Redeemer figure goes well with the Spawn display, so I'm excited to have it. Unfortunately, about halfway through the second day of Comic-Con, when I was there with my girlfriend, I got a migraine headache, which for me is basically the apocalypse setting on. I get a big blank spot in my vision where I can't see, and then I get wavy lines in my vision, and it's like visual, horrible torture. and then a headache hits me like a semi-truck, and I am knocked out. So I had to take a multiple hours long break. Thankfully, like I said, I was within walking distance of my girlfriend's place, so I was able to just go over there, crash, take a nap for a few hours. She kept hanging out at the con, seeing things, and then I popped back over when I was ready. After I woke up from taking that nap and having that migraine, I thought, I probably could look for one more thing to close out the con and to sort of celebrate surviving a medical emergency in the middle of Comic-Con. And I had seen in a booth somewhere in the con, like in the first 20 minutes I was there, that there was a copy of this single issue that I really wanted, that was a big ASM issue for me, that was for $20. And I thought, wow, it's worth more than 20, at least to me. Not much more, but 20 is a great price. That's what I would pay for it. So I thought, I'm going to go back into the con, and right before it closes, I'm going to see if I can get it. So at 4:30, I'm walking to the booths. The con closes at 5 on Sunday, so people are starting to pack up. I'm seeing everybody collapse their booths and everything. And Harley Yee, who I have bought from at many of the different cons, many of you know if you go to Comic Cons, Harley Yee usually has a huge booth. For me, it's almost like a museum at cons, right? You go up and you look at the wall and you see like maybe an Amazing Fantasy 15, or you see like a Ninja Turtles 1. They always have a Ninja Turtles 1. I don't know what it is about that booth, but every single time I see them, there's a Ninja Turtles 1, like first or second printing on the wall, graded. So I'm standing there at Harley Yee, I'm watching them start to pack up, and I'm digging through the Amazing Spider-Man bin, and sure enough, I find the book I was looking for, but it's the wrong price. So it must have been a different booth I had seen this one at. And it was $35 in the booth. It was a copy of The Amazing Spider-Man number 70. Now, I really like this pocket of time where the John Romita covers were super liminal. There's like this really cool cover with Mysterio's hands coming up around Spider-Man. There's a couple great Kingpin covers from that time frame, and I have a few of them. I have a copy of 69 and 72. I love my 72 because it has a stamp, like a price tag stamp, right in the middle of the graphic. And when I pulled out this ASM 70, I saw that it also has a price graphic, like right in the middle of it, and it just sort of ruins the impression of the cover. But I love that about it. It feels so old and authentic, and like it was actually for sale to kids on a newsstand. I don't know, it just gives it so much character. That's what I like about it. And there it was. It said 35, and I pull it out, and as I'm picking it up, I say, hey, would you do 20 on this? And the guy says yes before he even sees what book it is, which I felt like was a win, because I had waited till the last second of this con to get it for $20, and that was the price I had seen on it that I wanted to get it for. So 20 was, to me, the perfect thing to pay for it. And it's in great shape other than the stamp right there. It looks really pretty. It's in a Mylar bag now, so it's just like, it presents really nicely. It's not something I'm necessarily going to have hanging on my wall. It's more of a like run filler from that 60s era, like the issue 60s, not from the 1960s. With that, I packaged everything up, got it safe and tidy in my bag, and went home. Very happy to have spent some time at Emerald City Comic Con. Very happy to live in a city that has cons like this and be able to go without having to drive a car. That was like a huge change for me. Every con I've ever been to before this, I had to get in a car and drive to it and park in like a convention center parking lot and then go into this convention. So it was really cool to be able to go somewhere that's just like right here in the city that I live in. Walk to Comic Con, walk in, have a good time, walk home, have lunch, and then walk back to the con. I'm very much looking forward to next year. I'm looking forward to hopefully connecting with some of the other comic creators in Seattle. So if you make videos, you're in the Seattle area, you're on comic YouTube or TikTok or anything, please let me know. I would love to connect with you. I think it would be a great thing for us to be able to kind of stay connected in this hobby, in this part of the country. That's all, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.